and thank you for joining our webinar on ideas to optimize retirement income. My name is Tom Terhar. I'm an investment consultant with Conrad, Siegel Investment Advisors, and I'm joined by my colleagues Catherine Azels and Mike Hoyle. Just a reminder, Conrad Siegel Investment Advisors is a 100% full-time fiduciary. That's our structure, presently having $7 billion in assets entrusted to us with an experienced and credentialed team. Now today, what we plan to cover will not necessarily be personalized to your situation, but we're going to cover a broad range of topics with a goal toward educating some, providing a review for others, but most importantly, to get your minds thinking about options and strategies that may be beneficial for you. We do encourage you to reach out to us if you would like to have a more in-depth conversation one-on-one.
All right, so here you are. You've been working hard for all of these years to ensure that your retirement was bright. But as you may be finding out, planning out activities and traveling and such, that can be the easy part. Aligning your finances with those goals, that can be a much different story. And I'm sure that we can all agree, though, that optimizing retirement and income, it's a priority. So what's important to keep in mind, though, is that there is not just one approach. There's many different thoughts, many different techniques and strategies to get you to where you want to go. But really, there's a lot to consider. That's what we want to provide insight on today. But what we find prior to working with clients is even if they have that solid plan or strategy in place, those what ifs or the what am I missing, those thoughts creep in, and often at 3 a.m., unfortunately.
Yeah. And speaking of those thoughts that keep you up at night, let's kick off the discussion with a poll question that should be popping up on your screen. And the question is, regarding your income in retirement, what is top of mind right now? Or in other words, what concerns you the most? Is it A, investment strategy, B, inflation, C, Social Security claiming strategy, D, tax efficiency, or E, nothing because I work with Conrad Siegel? And go ahead and submit your answers.
Yeah, I like E a lot, but honestly, maybe their worry is not even on this list. There's so many things to consider, and maybe you're just trying to get through the day.
Yeah, that's right, Catherine. So Tom, what's on your mind right now?
I'm thinking about the Buffalo Bills winning the Super Bowl at last.
I don't know. I think the Eagles may have something to say about that. All right, I think the results are coming in. And while I was hoping for more of you to answer that you work with Conrad Siegel and have absolutely no worries, and maybe you'll want to after this afternoon's conversation, I did expect that inflation would be among the top answers. It certainly is top of mind for many of us, and we'll discuss it a little later on. Tom, can you give our viewers an overview of what we plan to cover this afternoon?
Yeah, so our talking points will be how much money and where to draw it from, ideas on maximizing what you have, and some current topics of note. We will encourage questions throughout the presentation and have saved a little time at the end to address these. So go ahead and use the chat feature at the bottom middle of your screen. You can type in your questions as they come to mind, and we'll try our best to get to them later. Now, first things first, and you may have heard this before, but it's one of the things that we end up spending a good deal of time with most of our clients on. That's making sure we get a good understanding of your goals. And these can include a number of things in retirement. You know, what do you want it to look like? Is it travel and adventure? Do you want to enjoy some peace and time, peace and quiet at home? Maybe you have a schedule of long-awaited trips to see family. Mike?
Yeah, these questions seem simple enough, yet it's likely that some of your goals conflict with each other. And maybe you want to leave a legacy to your children, but you also really want to live large in retirement after working hard during your career. Saving for retirement can be pretty straightforward using automatic payroll deductions to your 401k, but the transition into retirement and deciding how to most efficiently spend down your savings can be a real headache. Plus, your goals may change over time, and it may be difficult to estimate how much is needed to fund those goals. That's especially true with rising costs in the grocery store or at the doctor's office. Now, let's face it, unless you're Tom Brady, you only have one shot at retirement. So it's important that we make good decisions when it comes to building and spending our retirement income sources.
Yeah, and for anyone not following football, Tom Brady is a quarterback who famously retired in February, which lasted about 40 days because he felt like he still had a little bit left in the tank to give. But let's get into it. And you're probably wondering, what is income planning? And it sounds pretty straightforward, but if it was, we wouldn't have jobs. So it's figuring out, though, how to meet your financial goals, such as replacing a paycheck with stable sources of income, having resources for unexpected expenses, and meeting other goals, such as traveling or leaving a legacy. But you also have to face risk that you're all going to face in retirement. Some of those are in our control and some of them are not. And even some of those risks can derail even a well laid out plan, such as longevity. How long are we going to live? We don't know. Inflation, we've all heard plenty about this topic lately and see the impact of it and what it can do to our purchasing power. Very personal, but the early death of a spouse or a loved one can throw off your finances. The unpredictable stock market, again, another sore subject as of late. And of course, increasing healthcare expenses. And that's just to name a few. All right, so maybe you're getting to understand what income planning really is. But when do you start income planning? And honestly, I don't think it's really ever too early to start focusing on replacing income for retirement. It's a useful framework to understand always. And retirement security should really be considered with every employment decision throughout your working years. But really, as you get into that retirement red zone, 5 to 10 years prior to retirement, this is really where comprehensive financial planning that provides projections and scenarios to see if you're on track, that can be really helpful and reassuring. But even then, it's never finished. Regular revisions throughout retirement are needed based off of your needs, those life curveballs, and legislation such as tax policy. But really, you're probably thinking, well, where do I start? So Mike, tell them more.
Yeah, so a good place to start is by running some calculations. And like we said, there's not one single right approach, and we could do a whole presentation on this topic alone. So we're going to use the income replacement ratio method as an example. And many times when we ask clients if they have a budget or an idea of how much they're spending, they look at us kind of scared, like they're gonna get in trouble. And creating a budget can be a difficult task, but it's empowering to have more conscious control over your spending. And it doesn't really have to be complicated. And please do reach out if you're looking for some tools to help with your budget. Now, let's look at an example where we calculate the approximate amount of income needed in retirement and the amount of retirement savings needed to produce that income. To use the income replacement ratio method, you start with your current gross or before tax income. In this example, we use $100,000, which you can see on the top left of the screen. Then you subtract out expenses that will be eliminated after retirement. These include retirement plan savings, certain payroll taxes, and work-related expenses that you'll no longer have. And then we add additional expenses we expect to incur starting in retirement. These include health insurance costs and additional activities and entertainment expenses, since in retirement, every day is like the weekend. Now that gives you the income amount you'll need in retirement. You'll notice in our example that the income needed in retirement is about $83,000. A common shortcut to get to this point is what we call the 80% rule, where you simply take 80% of your current before tax income to calculate the amount of income needed in retirement.
All right, well then from that amount, looking at the top right of the screen now, you can deduct out fixed income sources like Social Security or a pension to get you to the amount that you will need to withdraw from savings and investments in your first year of retirement, that gap. In the example, we arrive at a $50,000 gap. Now, in order to confidently produce that amount of income over your lifetime, you then divide the $50,000 by 0.04 or 4%, which is known as that much debated safe withdrawal rate. So you're probably sitting there wondering, well, what's my number? Well, in our example, we arrive at an amount of $1,250,000 of savings needed at retirement to produce the $50,000 of annual income needed to supplement the Social Security and pension checks. It's definitely a simplification, but hopefully this gives you an idea of where to start to figure out what your number is. But let's talk a little bit more about retirement income with Tom.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So let's go a little further into these concepts because it seems simple enough on the surface, but there can be some potential missteps. So things you'll want to consider, what sources of income are available to you, how much will be paid, understandably, how long will it last, is the income source reliable, is there any cost of living protection, is there any flexibility in payout options or any other relevant features. Now, some of the benefits of fixed income sources include payments that are promised for one or more lifetimes, perhaps yourself and your spouse, a pension, for example. Your income is typically regular and predictable and not subject to market swings. Social Security payments, for example, these see increases with inflation, so your spending power doesn't diminish fully. Now, some of the costs or risks associated with fixed income sources, you do give up some control. There can be some extra fees in some cases. You're left to wonder, have you set aside a pool of savings to tap into for emergencies? So it does require planning on the front end, or to leave to your heirs. You may give up the opportunity to capture some market growth, and payments depend on the claims paying ability of an outside entity. Now, some thoughts on variable sources of income. Again, benefits. You have some spending flexibility, especially in the case of emergencies. Ideally, you have some growth potential depending on how you are invested. And you can keep the ability to transfer assets by either gift or inheritance. Again, there may be some costs or some risks. Withdrawing income from savings, from variable savings and variable sources, these can require spending discipline so you don't exhaust your resources. And if your savings are invested in the stock and bond markets, they're subject to market swings, such as we've all been experiencing this year. And a reminder that cash-like investments, these can lose purchasing power over time. So let's continue our discussion of income sources by taking a look at Social Security with Catherine.
Yes, so one of the fixed sources that we mentioned are Social Security. But some folks are nervous about the viability of Social Security. So let's see how you all feel about Social Security's future. I'm going to do a poll question for this. And our question to you is, what year is the Social Security Trust currently projected to run out of money? Do you think it's A, 2023, B, 2035, C, 2042, or D, 2049? So go ahead and submit those answers. But I have a few fun facts while you're thinking. So Social Security has been around, you might not know, since 1935, and it provides the majority of income to most older adults. So for 1 in 4 adults, it provides 90% of the income according to the Census Bureau. And the average benefit in January 2022 was $1,600 per month or $19,000 per year.
Yeah, wow, Catherine. I can't imagine how hard the recent inflation must be for those living primarily off of Social Security. At least some relief is coming with an 8.7% Social Security cost of living adjustment in January.
Yeah, which some even talk about that affecting the projection of Social Security's viability. But the correct answer as of now is B. The Social Security Trust is currently projected to be depleted in 2035, which I know is not that reassuring, right? But that's due to longer life expectancies and because the number of retirees collecting Social Security has been growing faster than the number of workers contributing through their taxes. As you can kind of see there on the chart, we're on the downturn. So in summary though, current retirees should not need to worry, but future retirees may see some legislative changes such as potentially a 22% cut to benefits, which was cited recently in US News, to decrease expenses or increase revenue. But we really think that it's best to be prepared for all situations. And we have some clients that even save with the assumption that Social Security may not be available to them. And so if it is, it's icing on the cake. Your personal feelings on the situation should be factored in, but Social Security is currently a fixed income source and a large one for retirees. So let's talk about how to maximize Social Security.
All right, so the decision of when to file for Social Security is one that far too many retirees make without thoroughly evaluating their options first. Now, this is a major mistake and one that in some cases can cost you significant amount of income over the course of your retirement. Now, the decision of when to claim Social Security is a very personal decision and one that varies significantly from person to person and couple to couple. It can also be a frustrating decision to make because there's no concrete correct answer since your life expectancy comes into play and is obviously an unknown factor. Now that said, many retirement experts today believe that too many people claim Social Security too soon, and many just take it as early as possible for fear of missing out on payments. Now remember, Social Security benefits are guaranteed to last your entire lifetime, no matter how long you live, and benefits are generally increased from 1 year to the next through cost of living adjustments. And additionally, delaying receiving Social Security benefits past what's called your full retirement age, which is likely 67 for many of you, can allow you to earn an additional 8% increase in payments each year until you turn 70.
Which is pretty nice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe the benefit of delaying is sinking in, but you have to eat in the meantime, right? So Catherine, do you think it makes sense for someone to delay Social Security and take income from their IRA to generate the additional income they need?
All right, well, so really your decisions regarding Social Security should focus on the main goal, which is to maximize your Social Security benefits over your lifetime while also considering your entire income picture and accounting for taxes. Social Security income is actually more tax effective than taking IRA withdrawals, since somewhere between 15 and 50% of your Social Security benefits will be received income tax free over an IRA, which is 100% taxable. This would indicate that delaying to maximize your monthly benefit makes sense. On the other hand, if you do delay and you pass away prematurely, you may miss out on collecting Social Security payments and would also have less in your IRA to pass to your loved ones since you spent down those assets first. Now, some retirees may have pensions or annuities or some other form of fixed income that may allow them to delay collecting Social Security without having to take IRA distributions or taking from savings to allow them to delay claiming. But basically, like everything, all you can do is make educated decisions. And with most financial decisions, there's a math side, and then there's that emotional heart side to think through. But of course, we're happy to have a conversation and perhaps use our specialized planning tools to analyze what Social Security collecting strategy may be best for you. But let's go back to our example and see how much more income they needed after accounting for fixed income sources.
Okay, and as is the case for many retirees, there's a bit of a gap between the folks' income need of $83,000 and their fixed sources. So let's consider their options for filling this gap. One option, understandably, is to work a little longer. From a research paper published by the Stanford Center for Economic Research called The Power of Working Longer, it was determined that deferring retirement by 3 to 6 months is like saving an additional 1% or more of your salary for 30 years.
Yeah, wow, Tom. It's hard to believe delaying retirement for just 6 months would make that large of an impact.
It is impactful, it's pretty powerful. Deferring retirement by even a month is like saving 1% more of your salary for the final 10 years. Right. So working a little longer, either full or part-time, can significantly affect the plan. Here's an example. Let's look at a 58-year-old single person with $100,000 in income. Let's say they have financial assets of $500,000. They're saving 20% of pay and determined that they need about 85% of income. Now, if this person retires at age 65, it's projected they may run out of savings by age 81. If they were to wait one more year to retire at 66, It buys 5 more years before the portfolio might be exhausted at age 86. And retiring at age 67, the assets are sufficient to carry him until age 90. So you can see there are some benefits to consider waiting. Another option is to fill the gap potentially with other assets, some variable sources. So we'll consider some other assets and how to turn them into income.
So your variable sources of income can include wages from part-time work or distributions from your savings. And these savings fall into one of 3 buckets. Now, first, you have your taxable bucket. Accounts that fall into this bucket include your savings or money market accounts, as well as individually or jointly owned brokerage accounts or even trusts. These accounts are funded with after-tax savings, and the interest and dividends earned in these accounts are taxed in the year they are received. So unlike the next 2 buckets we're going to discuss, which contain qualified savings, these taxable accounts have no tax deferral benefits. For this reason, we typically recommend spending from this bucket first in early retirement. Having savings in this bucket could also allow you to delay collecting Social Security and defer taking distributions from your IRAs in early retirement. Now, second, you have your tax-deferred bucket. Tax-deferred accounts carry many names: 401k, 403b, profit-sharing plan, or traditional IRA. These accounts are funded with pre-tax dollars, and as the name implies, all income and capital appreciation is deferred until the time of withdrawal. Now, withdrawals are taxed at your ordinary income rate, and you must take required minimum distributions, or RMDs, starting at age 72, whether you need the income or not. Now, for those with larger balances in this bucket, it could bump you into the higher tax bracket. Finally, the third bucket is the tax-deferred and tax-free bucket. This bucket includes Roth 401ks, Roth 403bs, and Roth IRAs. These accounts are funded with after-tax dollars, and all income and capital appreciation is tax-deferred, and then withdrawals are tax-free. Also, there are no required minimum distributions from these Roth accounts, since the IRS does not benefit from collecting taxes when you take distributions from Roth accounts. Now, to get the most out of the tax-free growth benefits of these Roth accounts, we typically recommend pulling from this bucket last.
Really, though, having all 3 buckets will provide you with the best tax diversification and allow for maximum flexibility during your spend down phase in retirement. In certain circumstances, when clients have a taxable bucket to spend from, we're able to get them into the 12% ordinary income tax bracket and the 0% capital gains tax bracket from early in retirement up until they reach RMD age. This can be an incredibly powerful tax saving technique. So again, if it's something that you want to discuss, we can talk about if it's possible for you. But now, using those 3 buckets of assets, let's look at some strategies for generating income. And really, it comes down to 3 major approaches that we see utilizing to turn retirement assets into retirement income. And that comes down to the flooring approach, the bucket approach, which is a different bucket than we just talked about, and then the systematic withdrawal approach. So let's go a little bit more into what they are and what might be best for you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Some retirees may wish to secure a committed cash flow to meet their necessities, creating a floor, so to speak, also known kind of as essential versus discretionary spending. And to accomplish this, a portion of the portfolio is put into guaranteed or low-risk products, or perhaps a laddered strategy to create an income floor to meet essential expenses. Now, Social Security, once it becomes available to you, creates at least a partial floor, and as we've heard, delaying receipt increases this floor. Now, sometimes folks will look at the essential versus discretionary approach is thought of as annuitization for the core piece and investing for the long term. The aim, understandably, is to guarantee your basic expenses and to allow for upside potential on the discretionary expenses. Now, a challenge can be that clients may think of their standard of living as their essential needs, whereas we're really looking at this as being perhaps, food, shelter, and property taxes, and the rest being then discretionary expenses. Mike?
Well, moving on to the bucket approach, which is also known as the age-banded approach, where you create separate portfolios with different risk characteristics based on the timing you expect to use or spend the assets in each bucket. So the bucket to fund short-term needs is invested very conservatively, whereas the bucket set aside for long-term goals is invested much more aggressively. This form of mental accounting integrates asset allocation with income allocation, or again, that timing of spending. It can be helpful for some as they plan for different phases of retirement. It can also help you to worry less about your long-term bucket, since you know your short-term bucket can fund any expected near-term needs. Now, for others, it may be difficult to rationalize managing many different buckets when you could invest to an overall asset allocation in a more efficient manner. As we said, there are two sides to retirement planning, the mathematical and the emotional. This strategy addresses the emotional need for retirees to break long-term planning into smaller, more simplified pieces. The bucket approach may also help with self-control and minimize excess withdrawal risk, since each bucket is closely linked with specific goals, meaning the longer-term buckets may be perceived as locked for later use.
Right. But the third approach, and probably the most common, is the systematic withdrawal approach. And really with that strategy, you generate an income stream off of your investments, utilizing a diversified portfolio based off of your risk profile. And it's managed for total return, where you come up with a withdrawal rate based off of a predetermined amount and adjust for inflation and market performance in future years. Of course, withdrawals are funded by a combination of interest, dividends, and portfolio holdings. And you heard us say it before, the 4% safe withdrawal rate. This is a very commonly mentioned approach where you use 4% of your portfolio value to arrive at the safe withdrawal rate to fill your income gap after fixed income sources. Of course, 4% is debated, and it's not always as easy as just using that percentage, but it does give you a starting point. And interesting enough is that 96% of the time with the strategy, the retiree will have principal left over, and half the time, wealth is actually increased by a factor of 1.6. Tom, I know some of it's just so emotional, but which strategy do you think is best?
Well, let's look at it this way. Say you and 3 of your friends are playing cards. Everybody gets hungry, so you order a large pizza. And when the pizza arrives, it isn't sliced. So you start to cut it in the basic pie slice pattern. But one of your friends, who might have had a beverage or two, stops you and says, look, if we cut the slices lengthwise, we can each have more pizza to eat like this. And obviously, which pattern of cuts fills you up more? Unless someone's grabbing faster, it really makes no difference. The pizza doesn't get larger just because you slice it in a different way, this way or that. So Catherine, really the same goes for retirement assets and bucket strategies. For a given total asset size, once you exceed the sustainable withdrawal rate, it does not matter how many buckets you divide it into. The probability of running out of money will remain just about the same. No amount of buckets can produce miracles.
And regardless of which income strategy you choose, there are a few things to consider beyond those strategies. Maybe your primary concern is not whether or not you have enough savings to generate an income stream, but you're concerned about taxes. Or maybe you're used to getting a bi-weekly paycheck with taxes already taken out, but you aren't exactly sure how to handle the distributions from your various savings and investment accounts. So let's dive a layer deeper into these topics and consider some of the hot topics related to retirement income planning.
So you may be saying in your head, though, all of this talk about IRAs and variable income and income generation, I only have a 401k. Well, regardless of the vehicle being used to fund your retirement, At some point, you will retire, hopefully. And when you do, you'll be faced with one of your first major decisions with regard to income planning. And that's what to do with the money you've accumulated in your employer-sponsored retirement plan, such as a 401k, a 403b, 457, and the like. In many cases, people choose to roll funds over to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA because they tend to offer greater control over one's retirement funds. But that's not the only option, as you can see on the slide. Believe it or not, you have as many as 6 different options for your employer-sponsored retirement plans when you leave work. Each of these potential alternatives offer unique benefits and drawbacks. So it's usually a good idea to discuss your options with a knowledgeable professional so that you can make savvy decisions that are right for you and your family, because there are side effects to IRA distributions. Tom, tell us more about those.
Yeah, as Catherine pointed out, these variable sources of income, they can produce some complexity and some side effects. This includes your traditional IRA withdrawals. These do more than just add to your taxable income. They can also cause you to be phased out of certain itemized deductions and some tax credits. They can increase your exposure to the 3.8% surtax on investment income. If you take an IRA withdrawal, you might also have to include more of your Social Security benefits in income, and your Medicare Part B premiums may increase. If you want to try and avoid these issues, then you need to plan. Now, again, each household's circumstances are unique, so we won't address specifics here, but we encourage you to reach out to your advisor for further conversation.
Yeah, one of those potential side effects to IRA distributions is the impact they can have on your tax bracket. Now, also, a troubling aspect of IRA planning is that the tax rate on your future distributions is unknown. So even if you can project your income with relative confidence, there's no guarantee that tax rates will remain the same. And while it's hard to find someone who doesn't think they pay too much in taxes now, the reality is that the top tax rates today are pretty low in a historical context. Take a look at this chart to see what I mean. When the income tax was first introduced in 1913, the top rate was only 7%. But within a few years, the top rate had already skyrocketed to over 70%.
Yikes, we think we have it bad now.
I know, but it gets even worse. After dropping back down to as low as 25% after World War I, the top rate jumped to 63% in 1932 and actually reached a peak of 94%. Now, from there, it wasn't until more than 50 years had passed when in 1987, the top tax rate finally dropped back below 50%, letting those in the top bracket keep more of their income than they were forced to give over to Uncle Sam. Now, of course, not everyone pays that top tax rate. In fact, it's only a very small percentage of taxpayers that do. But with that said, our national debt is at all-time highs. The budget really hasn't been balanced in years, and fiscal troubles for many of our programs like Social Security and Medicare, it's possible that tax rates could go up across the board. As a matter of fact, the tax bracket decreases that were initiated in 2018 through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act are set to sunset in 2026. So that makes coming up with the right plan even more important.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of taxes, though, let's talk about IRAs and conversions, because they do offer tremendous benefits of tax-free growth and income. And depending on your situation, Roth strategies can be beneficial even earlier than retirement. So before your retirement years and then into retirement. If you're still working, it may be worth contributing to a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k for the tax benefits in the future. Even if you have already retired, you can consider a conversion from an IRA to a Roth IRA. This has been in the financial media often lately, and you may have heard about this. So we want to shed some light on the topic. And you guessed it, it's complex. Anyone can convert, but should you convert?
Well, the potential of the tax-free nature of the Roth IRA, as well as the absence of required mandatory distributions or required minimum distributions, may also provide you with additional benefits, such as a hedge against tax rates rising in the future. Now, when it comes to your retirement, there are a lot of unknowns. What will the markets do? What will inflation be like? What will your tax rate be? And so on. And the last one, taxes, which we've touched on a number of times tonight, is a concern for many retirees, and one we've already talked about a bit. A Roth IRA conversion may help you manage that risk by paying taxes at today's known, potentially lower rates. If tax rates do rise in the future, the tax-free distributions from the Roth IRA will be even more valuable. Of course, if you think your tax rate will be lower in retirement, then this might not necessarily be an indication this strategy might not be optimal for you. And also, since Roth IRA distributions in retirement are generally tax-free, they typically don't impact the other things tied to your income that we've discussed earlier. So a couple of points. Roth conversions may provide you with a hedge against future tax increases. Taxes are a concern for a lot of retirees. Admittedly, future tax rates are an unknown, and conversions allow you to pay taxes at today's known rates. But you do want to remember that you will need to pay taxes on any conversion that you do. So having cash available to cover that is key.
Another hot topic we find ourselves talking about a lot recently is how much of an allocation to bonds you should have. Of course, among other things, this depends on how long of a time horizon you have, as well as what your risk tolerance is. And the historical wisdom is that you should increase your exposure to bonds and decrease your exposure to stocks as retirement approaches to reduce your level of risk and the chances of a large downturn in your account. But then 2022 happened. And bonds, which were historically thought of as a lower risk asset that would act as a buoy to keep your account afloat during times of stock market turmoil, have experienced significant negative returns year to date. So what should you do? Move to 100% stocks and possibly just throw some fuel on the fire during this recessionary period? That's likely not the best idea, especially if you're nearing retirement age. So Catherine, can you share a bit more about our thoughts on fixed income and why we believe it's important to keep an appropriate allocation to bonds?
Yeah, it's definitely something to weigh out. But here are some of the discussions that we're having with our clients in relation to fixed income. You want to keep your duration or maturity relatively short. The longer the duration of a bond, the more sensitive it is to interest rate hikes that we've been experiencing this year. There is an inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. So as interest rates go up, bond prices go down. But if you keep your duration short, the prices of your bonds fall less with each rate hike. Remember, the upside of rising interest rates is that the interest that you are receiving is rising as well. And of course, the interest you receive can help to offset the falling bond prices. Another thing to remember is that if a bond is held to maturity, you still get that full principal back, in which case falling bond prices doesn't really matter unless you need to sell while prices are low to generate income. And finally, if you're invested in a somewhat conservative allocation, it may make sense to move a small portion of your account from bonds to stocks to help your account recover your losses this year when stocks do bounce back. If this is something that sounds like you have an appetite for, we would recommend reaching out and having a discussion with one of our advisors first to confirm that it really does make sense for your personal situation, because there's a lot to consider.
Yeah, historically, one of the better hedges against inflation has been stocks. Yet, as Mike pointed out a couple of minutes ago, if you increase your stock exposure, portfolio volatility and the risk associated likely will go up. And this may be in conflict with the practice of making an allocation more conservative as your retirement approaches. So really, it's all about finding the balance point and choosing how to raise cash for income when stock and bond price markets are volatile. Remember to keep an eye on your time horizon too. Even though you are retiring, you still have a long investment time horizon in front of you.
So really, as you can tell from today, there's just so much to consider. And that's why we're going to start you off with a simple checklist that we'll provide after the presentation. But really, in the meantime, you want to start by asking yourself some questions. So do you prefer predictable retirement income and that check? Or do you not want to worry about the ups and downs of the market after you retire, even though that means less earned over your lifetime? Or maybe you're just not as concerned with how long your funds last, but you really want to meet your desired lifestyle needs and live in that now moment. Or is it important for a large portion of the income generated from your account to last your entire life and beyond to your heirs? And maybe you're just one of those people that would be comfortable giving up access to the money in order to receive the most predictable income possible. So much of this topic can be addressed by a certified financial planner that can partner with you to arm you with all the facts to make the best decisions for your family, which is really what it all comes down to.
Well, it's getting to that time, but before we wrap up, we do have time for a few questions. Many of you submitted questions during the registration process, and many questions were submitted via the chat feature during the presentation. So we won't have time to cover all of them, but if your question is not answered, we will reach out to you over the next few days to address them. So the first question that we have is, how much money do you need to retire? So a pretty broad question there, Tom. Would you like to take this one?
Sure, I'll give that a try. As we tried to summarize in the earlier example, looking at the income replacement method, getting a good sense of what your lifestyle spending needs will be. A number of variables, though, are introduced. It really depends on your life expectancy. It depends on what your expected investment returns are and what you experience. So it can really depend on a number of things. But we do have the tools to help you, and would encourage you to reach out and set up a separate conversation where we can dive a bit deeper into that for you.
All right, thanks, Tom. The next question we have is, what should you do if you've already retired and your withdrawal rate seems like it may be too high? So Catherine, what do you think on this one?
All right, well, first things first is no panic, right? We can plan forward for this. We all have seen inflation taking effect, and it's increased spending across the board for all of us. So first things first is to look at options to reduce your spending if possible. Maybe that's in the discretionary bucket. There has been nationwide talk of recent retirees having to go back to work part-time or full-time to make up for some of the inflationary expenses that they're facing. But really, I think so much of it comes on the front side to plan forward and make sure that you're addressing that. And then if you are in retirement, working with a professional to give you an idea of how to handle these life curveballs. We can help you through those. But generally, inflation is something that will come back down to historic norms, but we are facing that struggle in the short term.
All right, good answer. Next question we have is, when is the best time to start taking Social Security? I'll go ahead and take this one. It's a tricky question, and typically we can't pinpoint the best time to start collecting until after someone passes away, since again, their life expectancy is unknown. And generally, if you feel like there's longevity in your family and you think you'll live a long life, it may make sense to wait if you can hold off and you have those other income sources to delay taking Social Security. And then again, that strategy could cause you to miss out on collecting payments if you pass away prematurely. So we often recommend a hybrid approach where one spouse would collect early and then the other spouse would delay. And also, we do have tools to analyze Social Security strategies and are happy to run an analysis if you reach out to us for help. All right, so the next question is an interesting one, Tom. What is sequence of returns risk?
This is one of those topics that unfortunately moved from concept to reality this year. In brief, this is the risk of undesired market performance early in one's retirement years, and plenty of folks are experiencing that this year. It is sort of random selection. You really don't know what's going to be in front of you when you hit the door, but it can be detrimental to the longevity of a portfolio and calls for course corrections and spending adjustments going forward very often.
All right, thanks, Tom. So another question is, how do you expect the current election cycle to affect stock markets? And obviously, elections are on people's minds. So Catherine, can you tackle this one?
Yes, I know. You're right. This is on our minds. We're getting all kinds of mail, seeing all kinds of commercials for it. But really, it's a hard one. Thanks, Mike. A lot happens in the world that impacts the markets that the president and the United States government have no control over. Whether you think a certain president is the best or the worst, or maybe somewhere in between, the hand that they are dealt can really be the biggest impact. So if you look at it, Obama entering in at the end of the great financial crisis led to big returns during his presidency. And you can debate whether they could have been bigger or smaller under different leadership, but the economic recovery really was the driver. And same goes for Bush with the impact of the great financial crisis and the dot-com bust. So look at now, right? Energy has been by far the best sector under Biden and was by far the worst under Trump. And I don't think anyone would argue that these returns align with each administration or party's goals or actions towards a traditional energy policy or companies.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, really, I'll just add in too. I mean, red or blue, it doesn't matter. We've seen under different leadership, the stock market goes up and it will continue to do so regardless of leadership.
Well, I hope that all comes to fruition, Catherine. Thank you very much. Well, that wraps up our time together today. After you exit the webinar, you will be given an opportunity to take a brief survey, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback on today's discussion. Our goal is to always be improving, so we do take your feedback to heart. Again, we will follow up with each of you over the next few days and provide a copy of our retirement income checklist. And whether you're a do-it-yourself investor or working with another advisor and open to a second opinion, or maybe just approaching retirement and realizing you may need some assistance, we would love to have a complimentary consultation to learn more about your situation and see if we can help in any way. So if anything we covered today sparked your interest, please do reply to the email so we can provide answers or have a conversation. Again, we are 100% full-time fiduciaries, so there's no obligation or pressure as we do not sell investment products or earn commissions. We are here to simplify the complex and help you achieve your goals by providing solid, research-based advice.
That's true, but we have to thank all of you again. We're so very grateful that you've taken time to join us today and hope that you found it valuable. So until next time, stay safe, stay well, and stay invested.